From the moment Sable Fairchild stepped off the Riverbrook station, her hopes shattered when Thurston Huxley shrugged dismissively at her skin color. The crowd whispered as her wilting bouquet hit the platform like a grim omen. Just when all doors seemed closed, the enigmatic Orion Caldwell appeared, inviting her to his lavish estate, where the hidden Fairweather legacy would reveal secrets powerful enough to overturn power and justice. This tense clash of honor and justice will leave you breathless. On the last day of spring, the Riverbrook sky hung heavy, mirroring Sable Fairchild's anxious anticipation. The train whistle echoed across gleaming tracks, white smoke rising lazily, painting a cinematic opening scene. She stepped off the carriage, clutching an old suitcase brimming with hope. 6 months of relentless correspondence, 100 letters steeped in longing and gratitude, had led her here. Her sleek black hair was neatly pinned up, a stylish fedora adding a touch of vintage charm that accentuated her poised demeanor and tailored coat. Sable Fairchild's eyes sparked with determination, whispering to herself that this was a new beginning, where she'd find love and peace among strangers. At the platform, she breathed deeply, inhaling the scent of engine oil and wild flowers carried by the morning breeze. In her mind, Thurston Huxley's cryptic message resurfaced like a haunting note. I can't wait any longer. You're the image in the letters, but... The ellipsis was never explained. Now she was moments from meeting the man behind the words. The train's headlamp illuminated the passenger car, casting a glow on a moment brimming with pride and nervous excitement. Suddenly, from the crowd of travelers, a tall, lean figure emerged. Time seemed to slow. Each step Thurston Huxley took imprinted on the morning mist. He wore a finely tailored suit. His tie knotted with precision. His eyes scanned a luggage list before softening as they met hers. A gust of wind lifted a letter into the air, marking a fateful intersection. When they were a mere arm's length apart, Thurston Huxley's face paled, his labored breaths sounding like a lone drum in the quiet. Sweat beaded on his ghostly skin, betraying a shock he hadn't anticipated. The street lamp's glow fell on the fresh bouquet he held. Red roses, still vibrant but wilting in his trembling hands. This can't be, he choked, his voice quivering like a broken string. In that moment, whispers rose from behind, a mix of astonishment and gossip. Station staff in uniforms lingered in the shadows, their curious glances undisguised. They'd never seen a refined man turn and flee from his fiancée. Everything seemed to freeze, save for the frantic pounding of Sable Fairchild's heart. Yet she didn't falter. The fabric of her coat flared with the wind, underscoring her resilient spirit. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her voice cut through the misty haze like steel. You never asked, she said coldly, each word carved with precision. Not about my origins, not about my heart, only what you saw. Her resolute tone exposed his shallow judgment, drawing the crowd's attention. Thurston Huxley stumbled, his eyes a mix of regret and fear. His lips trembled. I'm sorry, Sable. But his apology felt flimsy against the public humiliation. The bouquet fell to the platform, petals scattering under his hurried steps. The name he'd once spoken with hope now stood as a symbol of bitter disappointment. Amid the chaos, Sable Fairchild's steps remained steady. She pressed her lips together, picking up her suitcase and the final letter, proof of 6 months of devotion. A sigh of disbelief mingled with emptiness flickered through her, but she suppressed it, channeling it into strength. With each step, the scene behind her faded, leaving the crowd's gazes of admiration and regret. The train whistle urged departure, but Sable Fairchild didn't look back. She walked toward the station gate, where Riverbrook's streets awaited her new story. A woman unbowed by prejudice, with a proud heart and unwavering resolve. Her quest for love had begun with a harsh rejection, yet it also revealed the unyielding strength of an unbreakable spirit. In the final frame, she paused, gazing at the sky tinged with dawn's pink glow, as if declaring, "I'm still here, stronger than ever." Every line of those letters was etched in Sable Fairchild's memory, like vivid streaks of paint on the canvas of time. For 6 months she'd wandered tirelessly with pen and paper, pouring her heart out to Thurston Huxley. Every pulse of her soul, from the misty Boston mornings to the fading sunsets along the Charles River, each letter was a lyrical ballad, fragrant with memories and hopes that lit the path to a new life. She'd imagined his face countless times through his words, smiling at her like a sweet promise, soothing her loneliness. Her luggage rolled slowly across the platform, the wheels clattering against the tracks in a lively rhythm, like the beat of a predestined melody. She felt like a traveler from a fairy tale, her worn suitcase holding a pale green fedora, a gift she'd carefully chosen last year, now a symbol of her aspirations and dreams. 3 weeks on rickety trains, gazing at endless fields before the landscape shifted, revealing the tranquil Riverbrook with its cobblestone streets and red-tiled roofs. Every mile echoed his words. "You'll find peace, you'll find love, you'll find love." But that romantic vision shattered the moment she stepped onto the platform. Her elegant fedora wobbled on her head, the wind blowing fiercely as if to sweep away her illusions. I pictured a delicate, fair-skinned girl with golden hair. Thurston Huxley's voice rang out, hesitant and hollow. His words weren't just about the hat. They were a blade slicing through her dignity, shredding the fragments of her trust. The petals of the bouquet he'd given her, a token for their first meeting, wilted and fell. As if impatient with his deceit, the vibrant red of the roses now bore brown stains, like her hopes tarnished by prejudice. Her footsteps creaked on the cold brick platform, each sound a rebuke of the humiliation she endured. Why didn't he ask? Why did he only see the surface? The rhetorical questions echoed in Sable Fairchild's mind, weaving through her pain and silent fury. She pressed her lips together, clinging to every shred of self-respect. Tears traced down her cheeks, but she refused to crumble. Each tear was proof of 6 months of toil and hope, now unexpectedly shattered. In that broken moment she questioned herself. Did I dream too much? Did I give too much hope? The echo of doubt clawed at her heart, but it also stirred her inner strength. Sable Fairchild wasn't just a woman standing on a platform. She was the embodiment of pierced aspirations. She'd given everything for a promised love, leaving the familiar safety of the city to venture into unknown lands. Yet all that remained was emptiness and Thurston Huxley's retreating figure amid the train's smoke. The air crumbled around her, each glint in her eyes dimming as his words rang out. I can't accept you. Bitterness seeped into her senses. She heard the passengers' whispers, the station staff's probing glances, and the wind's mocking howl. Every sound grew sharp, forcing her to face the harsh truth. But amid that undertow, she held on to a single note of silence, a reflection on her worth, her right to love and respect. It was the only light in the storm of gloom. Gently she steadied her fedora, gripped the suitcase handle, and walked forward. Each step was a choice, to let go of a foolish past and embrace an unknown future. Dew on the wilted petals fell onto the tracks like fragments of a broken dream, yet it sparked a desire for rebirth. I'll keep going, she whispered to herself, her voice low but resolute. I'll write my own story, no longer defined by anyone else. Sable Fairchild's figure faded beyond the station gate, but the image of this upright woman would linger in the minds of those who witnessed her. She didn't flee from shame. She turned it into a flame to warm her resolve. And though the town was quiet, she carried the ballad of those 6 romantic months, its melody a testament, even in rejection, She was worthy. Under the overcast sky, she carved a path to a radiant future, proving that pain was merely the prelude to newfound strength. The man approached Sable Fairchild with a hurried stride, as if to erase the distance between them, his trembling hands clutching a crumpled train ticket and a wad of wrinkled bills. The dim yellow glow of the platform lights cast shadows on his neatly pressed suit, his pale cheeks betraying a deep unease. Thurston Huxley spoke awkwardly, his voice hoarse. I thought this might help. Hotel costs, a ticket back to Boston, whatever you need." The words spilled out disjointedly, like scattered pebbles devoid of warmth. There was no real apology, just a curt excuse. Sorry for the misunderstanding. His eyes darted toward the crowd of strangers, as if searching for a lifeline, but they couldn't hide the shame enveloping him. His hasty gesture, placing the ticket on her suitcase, was mechanical, and he quickly withdrew his hand, as if afraid to touch the raw hurt simmering beneath her composure. Under the faint light, Sable Fairchild stood tall, her gaze quietly studying the unease etched across his face. No longer the naive woman of the letters, she saw through the hesitation and shallowness behind his actions. His apology rang hollow, a weak attempt to soothe the fracture in her heart. Now, as he pressed the money into her hand, she felt each bill weigh heavier than any comfort. "Money doesn't mend honor," she said, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. Each syllable echoed in the still air, the train whistle amplifying his stunned silence. She didn't need his pity. She refused to be a burden. Sable's eyes blazed with resolve, her fingers tightening around the suitcase handle as if gripping a shield to protect her dignity. Thurston Huxley's discomfort spread like wildfire. He faltered, glancing at the remnants of the bouquet scattered on the platform, then turned to seek the safest escape. His eyes flicked toward the parking lot, as if suddenly recalling an urgent errand. Without a reply or a parting glance, he retreated with heavy steps toward the exit. The sound of his shoes clacked sharply on the cold bricks, marking the final punctuation of a romance that had briefly bloomed. Sable Fairchild stood still, letting the wind sweep through the void where he'd stood, carrying away unfinished promises. The scene slowed, leaving only her and her small suitcase in the vast emptiness, where she first realized that sacrifice doesn't always yield reward. As Thurston Huxley vanished beyond the iron gate, the air grew heavier. The platform was unnaturally quiet, mirroring Sable Fairchild's mood. She squared her shoulders, inhaling deeply to dispel the thick scent of engine oil and train smoke. Her heart still pounded in her chest, but her steps were steadier than ever. Ignoring the curious stares of the station staff and hurried afternoon travelers, she retrieved her fallen fedora, smoothing its creases as if realigning her resolve. In the silent moment, she asked herself, "Where does my worth lie?" The answer flared within her like a faint light in the darkness. In her proud heart and unyielding reason, Sable Fairchild walked away from the platform, leaving behind the shallow apology and meaningless bills. She set out on a new path, one with no room for the fragments of her past. And though no one saw it, she offered a faint smile. Because at last, she'd chosen to honor herself above all else. It was the first step on a journey to affirm her true value, not through the lens of prejudice, but through her own effort and unwavering determination. The Riverbrook station fell silent as spring breezes swept scattered wildflower petals across the platform's threshold. Amid the vast emptiness, Sable Fairchild stood resolute, her pale green fedora tilted slightly, a shield for her proud heart. She'd endured scrutinizing glances and whispers since stepping off the train, but nothing could prepare her for the commanding, enigmatic presence about to emerge. As Thurston Huxley, still trembling, turned away, leaving wilted flowers and a train ticket strewn at her feet, a tall, imposing figure approached with quiet authority. The stranger's arrival was unannounced, like startling but resonant, like thunder rumbling deep within the earth, both staggering and kindling new hope. He didn't rush to tip his hat or flash a theatrical smile, offering only a slight nod to Sable Fairchild with a gaze that pierced deeply. This was Orion Caldwell, his calm exuding such authority that it seemed to emanate from the fingers lightly resting on his suitcase handle, his stern eyes weighing her fate. His finely woven suit moved fluidly with him, a testament to understated wealth. His voice rumbled like a war drum, startling the heart. His decision doesn't speak for everyone. Come with me. The words weren't a question or a hesitation. They were a command, defying the prejudices poised to crush her. As Orion Caldwell raised his hand, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The passengers' murmurs softened into curious, respectful glances. He stepped toward a sleek black carriage parked by the platform, adorned with fresh flowers and red velvet seat covers. "I invite you to stay at my home," he said, his tone cold but resolute. His words brooked no argument. The invitation came without conditions, without mention of lineage or prejudice, only a clear signal of her right to choose. The defiance in his voice made Thurston Huxley blanch further. He clasped his hands, attempting to interject. "You don't understand, Caldwell, this—" But his voice cracked, unable to halt the commanding ring of Orion's presence. As Thurston Huxley opened his mouth, his unease teetering toward outrage, Orion Caldwell merely raised an eyebrow, his gaze tracking the frail gestures of the polished man. "I understand perfectly," he replied, his voice smooth yet icy, radiating unshakable certainty. "This town's traditions may stop you from caring for her, but tradition isn't law, and I, owning more than half the land around here, have the right to make a different choice." Chaos flared in Thurston's eyes. He froze, his heart unable to keep pace with such commanding strides. Every gaze locked onto the silent clash between two forces, mighty versus meek, resolute versus reliant, and in that fleeting moment, everyone knew who would prevail. Sable Fairchild watched the scene with a racing heart but steady shoulders. Deep within, she felt the potent energy radiating from Orion Caldwell, challenging injustice while beckoning hope for fairness. She didn't need to speak. A subtle nod was enough to signal her acceptance of his offer, transcending all divide. The wilted bouquet lay quietly on the bricks, a permanent relic of a bitter past, while the luxurious carriage door opened, a symbol of a different beginning. The platform's lamps cast flickering light on Orion's suit and glossy leather gloves, highlighting the contrast between present and future. Everything unfolded like a gripping drama, an unexpected invitation, a steadfast challenge, and a slow, enveloping force surrounding her. In that moment, Sable Fairchild stepped into the carriage, her gaze briefly meeting Thurston Huxley's, his face a mix of shame and barely concealed anger. Under the warm golden glow of the late afternoon, the carriage rolled forward, carrying her away from humiliation toward a bold, empowering dream. Her heart surged, not from shallow apologies, but from the chance to be guided by the strength and vision of a man who dared defy prejudice. Sable Fairchild took her first step onto the cobblestone path leading to Caldwell Estate, where granite walls gleamed with an elegant ivory sheen. The front porch was a still life painting. Climbing roses bloomed shyly amid lush green foliage, and a black painted iron lantern dusted with morning dew sparkled like pearls. A spring breeze carried the scent of oak and faint wood smoke, hinting that the mansion wasn't just a home, but a repository of storied memories. She trembled with a mix of awe and caution, wondering if she had the courage to cross this threshold. Her footsteps paused before an ebony door inlaid with intricate mother-of-pearl designs. A brass bell chimed softly, its echo resonating through the wide-open hall. Instantly, Marceline Greer appeared like a warm, grounded flower in the foyer. She wore a classic earth-tone dress, its precise stitching exuding unpretentious elegance. Her gentle eyes held a resolute air, conveying a silent message. This house is a place of order and hospitality. Her greeting was just warm enough. "Welcome, miss. I'm Marceline Greer. Please, come inside." The hallway stretched wide on both sides, with bronze candelabras standing out against cream-painted walls. Every corner was adorned with large oil paintings in gilded frames, glowing under the light of a crystal chandelier suspended high above. The light spilled onto a Persian tapestry rug, soft under her leather shoes, blending with the gentle trickle of a small fountain at the hall's end, creating a sweet, luring melody that guided Sable Fairchild deeper into the interior. The scent of jasmine essential oil wafted through, calming her heart while stirring curiosity and caution. Marceline Greer led her to a carved dragon and phoenix door, revealing a grand drawing room. The space was flooded with natural light through floor-to-ceiling windows, their red velvet curtains drawn aside like a royal stage. Emerald damask upholstered armchairs were arranged symmetrically around a white marble fireplace, etched with neoclassical motifs. On the mantel, antique clocks glowed softly beside small bronze statues depicting European aristocratic hunting scenes. Sable Fairchild's heart stirred at the blend of opulence and artistry, but she quickly tempered her steps, keeping her guard intact. Beyond the drawing room, a narrow corridor led to the library, a place Orion Caldwell had often mentioned. Marceline Greer gently parted a curtain, revealing an ancient oak door. "This is the main library," she said softly, "where Mr. Caldwell often assists with organizing documents." The dry scent of old paper mingled with the rich aroma of leather-bound books, evoking secrets waiting to be uncovered. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, intricately carved with open squares, housed thousands of volumes, histories, ancient maps, classic literature, and poetry collections still bearing red ink from renowned figures. As the library door closed behind her, Sable Fairchild felt the space shrink to fit just her and her small suitcase. The background music faded, leaving only the steady sound of her footsteps on polished wood. Before her stretched a long table draped in green velvet, lit by hurricane lamps, with inkstands and quill pens nearby. Warm golden light from oil lamps along the shelves highlighted the wood's rich grain. The scholarly, solemn atmosphere urged her to immerse herself in the written word. Despite the allure of her surroundings, she maintained a cautious distance. A voice within reminded her, "This isn't a stage. It's a place of power." Her fingers grazed the spine of an old book, feeling the slightly rough leather. She knew each volume might hold clues about Riverbrook's land. Every yellowed page echoed the past, and she was on a quest to unearth buried truths. Marceline Greer watched from the doorway, her gaze warm yet permitting no disruption of the serene silence. She nodded slightly, as if granting permission to explore freely. It was a rare signal of trust that Sable Fairchild felt, alongside the weight of responsibility now on her shoulders. She smiled, realizing the true meaning of the station invitation. Not just a refuge, but a fortress of knowledge to build a new life. Outside the library window, the scene slowed. Lush rose gardens, stone pathways leading to a fountain, and specks of late-ceilinged sunlight on the foliage. All yielded to the library's realm, where Sable Fairchild lifted a thick volume of land deeds, ready to turn its pages. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a second to release her reservations, then opened them with a resolute gaze. This was the start of a new chapter, not just for her personal story, but for the justice and truth waiting to be affirmed in Riverbrook. The library at Orion Caldwell's estate still held the warmth of a crackling fireplace, its golden glow from oil lamps casting light across the bookshelves where specks of time's dust shimmered like floating sequins. Amid thousands of aged leather-bound volumes, Sable Fairchild moved lightly, her fingers grazing the spines of local histories and yellowed maps. From the first moment, the atmosphere enveloped her like a heavy velvet curtain, half curiosity and admiration, half apprehension about the secrets about to unfold. Before her, Orion Caldwell sat at an intricately carved oak table, his face solemn, his eyes glinting with encouragement. The scent of old paper mingled with the herbal tea Marceline Greer had just brought in, lending the space a warm yet charged tension. Sable Fairchild drew a deep breath, her hand trembling slightly as she pulled a small journal from the desk drawer. Its first page bore bold blue ink, dated March 12, Boston, the day she'd opened the final letter, severing ties with her past. But today, that journal wasn't for distant love. It was for a grander destiny. She looked up, her gaze steady, her voice warm but resolute. "Mr. Caldwell, I haven't told you the real reason I brought this suitcase." Orion Caldwell didn't respond immediately, merely leaning forward like a leaf stirred by the wind, giving her space to unburden her heart. Instead of recounting her time as a teacher at a Boston girls' school, she spoke of her grandfather, Judson Fairweather, a devoted steward to a prominent family across generations. In his final days, he'd given her a quiet gift. "Keep it until the time is right." Sable Fairchild produced a small silver key, intricately engraved, and placed it on the table with a pensive expression. A hidden vault beneath his home's floor, filled with gold and a collection of ancient maps and deeds, enough to prove ownership of Riverbrook's land. Her voice deepened, each word ringing like a revived anthem of justice. As she opened the suitcase, Orion Caldwell's breath caught. Ancient gold coins, their reddish hue neatly arranged in an ebony box, gleamed in the flickering firelight. Beside them lay fragile parchment sheets, their edges frayed, bearing faint but undeniable seals. Sable Fairchild gently spread them on the table, each sheet a piece of a forgotten story, a notarized deed from Judson Fairweather, dated 1866, boundary sketches, and notes on disputes long buried. Orion Caldwell's eyes shifted from surprise to contemplation, then flared with resolve. He saw not just material value, but a key to a historic turning point. The air grew heavy, like the calm before a storm. Orion Caldwell rested his hand on the documents, his voice trembling yet commanding. "If this all holds true, you hold the power to upend the structure of influence here." His words awakened every doubt in her. Prejudice, pressure, the web of elite families' alliances. But Sable Fairchild's heart beat with one rhythm. "I don't just want to expose the past. I want to rebuild fairness for this community." Her declaration blazed like a torch piercing the dark. To ensure credibility, she detailed her grandfather's meticulous record-keeping, how he safeguarded the secret legacy amid threats of post-Civil War confiscation. Her story wove tender memories of him in his worn suit with images of him quietly retreating to the attic, engraving seals on parchment. Orion Caldwell listened intently, his eyes fixed, his hands never straying from the maps. Each page she turned rustled like history's whisper, inviting him to join her in restoring truth. The conversation deepened as darkness pressed against the windows. Sable Fairchild glanced at Orion Caldwell, her voice light as incense smoke. "I need legal support, and the weight of your reputation to ensure these documents aren't dismissed as forgery." His face hardened with determination. "I'll stand with you. We'll bring justice to light and restore the Fairweather legacy's rights." His pledge rang stronger than the fireplace hiss. When Marceline Greer entered with a tray of warm tea, the two seemed to emerge from a charged haze. The chamomile scent blended with the tea's slight bitterness, infusing the moment with a sense of alliance. In the warm light and hushed air, Sable Fairchild smiled confidently, knowing the legacy's secret was no longer a private burden, but a torch guiding Riverbrook toward justice. In that moment, she and Orion Caldwell were no longer host and guest, but comrades on a mission to rewrite history. The fading light of dusk slipped through the tall library windows of Orion Caldwell's estate, casting long, silken streaks across the wooden floor. The space was so still it held its breath, disturbed only by the faint rustle of old books as Sable Fairchild's fingers traced the spines of leather-bound volumes. The faint smell of scorched paper mingled with the subtle scent of aged leather, evoking a century of history buried in each page. She paused before a stack of ancient maps, her eyes following the delicate boundaries on yellowed parchment, the vibrant Riverbrook of the past, now awaiting revival. Her footsteps echoed softly on the green velvet rug as she pulled a thin leather-bound notebook from her suitcase. Its first page bore the smudged ink of Judson Fairweather, marked 1866, signaling the start of a quest for rightful ownership. Each letter curved like a serpent gliding over stone, drawing her into a labyrinth of memory. She flipped through the pages, mentally calculating dates, cross-referencing with official maps from a drawer, her heartbeat quickening with each discovery. In the silent library, she was embarking on a battle of knowledge. The glow from the desk lamp reflected on Sable Fairchild's face, shimmering with resolve. She compared ink marks on deeds with etchings on a map knife, meticulously noting each clue in her notebook. The soft ticking of an antique clock on the shelf heightened the tension, urging her to finish before nightfall. "If I delay, others will find out," she told herself, her back damp with sweat, but her shoulders steady. Outside the library, Orion Caldwell's silhouette flickered through the door's gap. He didn't enter, only watched through the narrow opening, his gaze an invisible hand bolstering her will. Finally, he stepped in quietly, placing a steaming teacup and a small packet of biscuits on the table. "Don't forget to eat," his voice warm yet firm, a reminder that duty and well-being go hand in hand. Sable Fairchild nodded, offering a faint smile, but her eyes never left the papers. She returned to the maps, analyzing coordinates, annotating the locations of an old bamboo forest and a concealed gold mine lost to time. Her fingers toyed with a quill, her gaze piercing the map as if seeing the call of justice itself. Then she flipped back to the parchment deeds, her voice murmuring softly in the library. Per Clause 4, page 2, usage right transfer to descendants after a century. The words hooked into her memory, reminding her that the legacy wasn't just property, it was the voice of her ancestors. The oil lamp's flame danced, casting a halo of light around the table where Sable Fairchild arranged the deeds. She sorted the papers into 3 groups: original documents, notarized copies, and supplementary notes. It was as if she were assembling a vast puzzle, each piece vital. The silence grew so profound that even a stray footstep could shatter this treasure-laden reverie. As night fully descended, only the faint glow of candles remained. Yet Sable Fairchild stayed rooted. Sweat beaded on her forehead, unnoticed, as a fire of justice blazed in her heart. "Things will change," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. "Riverbrook will no longer be a land of prejudice." Her words echoed in the library, a proclamation reverberating through the ancient walls. At that moment, Marceline Greer tapped lightly on the door, bringing a canister of paper and fresh quills. "Call me when you need me," she said, her voice warm but carrying a respectful distance. Her presence reminded Sable Fairchild this wasn't a stage for emotions, but an arena for relentless intellect. She thanked her, then dove back into her work, prioritizing documents for the next confrontation with entrenched powers. When the clock struck midnight, she closed the maps and secured the deeds in an ebony box. The wind howled outside, like a drumbeat summoning a soldier to battle. Sable Fairchild stood, slipping her hand into her coat pocket to retrieve the silver key, the key to her grandfather's hidden vault. She cradled it against her chest, her eyes meeting Orion Caldwell's through the glass. His gaze sparked with trust, and he nodded slightly, fueling her courage. Before leaving the library, Sable Fairchild brushed the dust from a book's spine and closed the door softly. She stepped into the hallway where the fountain's trickle had ceased, leaving a hushed stillness. Beneath the shadowy ginkgo trees, she inhaled deeply, the cold piercing her coat. "The work has just begun," she whispered, clutching the key and notebook. Her steps carried her from the library, bearing the light of truth and a resolve to challenge prejudice, ready to stir a tempest in Riverbrook. Rumors of Sable Fairchild's arrival at Caldwell Estate spread like wildfire through dry fields. From the corner cafe where the owner poured thick espresso to the bustling market where vendors swapped fruit, everyone whispered about the colored lady in a town accustomed to familiar faces. Curious adult glances, children's murmurs, and furtive stares weighed on Sable Fairchild, but her eyes held only resolve and curiosity for her new life. The next morning, church bells rang across the town square. Cassidy Beaumont, the pastor in pristine white robes, paused before a religious statue, quietly telling the deputy warden, "I hear Miss Fairchild stirring up talk everywhere." Her tone was gentle but tinged with concern. Could a non-native woman truly blend into their traditional community? Meanwhile, a group of congregants formed a circle, debating whether to invite Sable Fairchild to the church's charity gala. Under an ancient oak, the phrase "colored" echoed repeatedly, an indelible mark of hesitation and prejudice. The midweek market burst with color, lush greens of kale, rosy tomatoes, and golden pumpkins. Serafina Quimby, the newly appointed elementary school principal, stopped by a steaming bread stall, exclaiming, "They say Miss Fairchild's working under Caldwell. Is it true the new library's drawing crowds?" Her question was sociable, yet cautious. People were curious but wary, asking instead of visiting to see for themselves. This was Sable Fairchild's first challenge, facing a society where outsiders were met with suspicion. Amid the storm of gossip, a familiar figure emerged. Thurston Huxley crossed the rusted iron gate of Caldwell Estate. His suit, worn at their station meeting, was freshly pressed, but his eyes still carried shame and regret. He passed the cedar trees, nodding to Marceline Greer, her polite smile unwavering, then paused at the stone steps. His footsteps resounded like a drumbeat, a reminder. This was a return, but he was no longer in control, now a man seeking answers for his mistakes. Townsfolk frowned at him, some turning away, as if avoiding a scandal's taint. In the estate's front yard, Sable Fairchild conversed with Orion Caldwell, their voices warm amid blooming, climbing roses. Seeing Thurston Huxley, Orion Caldwell gave a faint smile, his eyes probing. He stepped beside Sable, resting a hand on her shoulder in subtle protection, and said softly, "We have a guest." Without naming him, his tone was both courteous and defiant. Thurston Huxley clasped his hands, his face a mix of pensiveness and unease. He hesitated, then said, "I've come to apologize and make amends." But beneath the apology, his voice lacked the strength to dismantle the wall of prejudice. The scene between the three was taut as a bowstring. Orion Caldwell serene, exuding authority, Sable Fairchild smiling calmly, her eyes unwavering with self-respect. She replied, "You know what you said. I'm here now for my grandfather Judson Fairweather's legacy, not for anyone else." Her words stunned Thurston Huxley. He bowed his head, shoulders sagging, as if bearing the weight of past sins. Townsfolk lingered by the fence, silently watching the encounter unfold like an endless drama. Suddenly, a passenger carriage rolled down the dirt road. Onlookers recognized Corwin Ashford, the esteemed judge who presided at the town hall. He waved to Orion Caldwell, then fixed Sable Fairchild with a lawyer's gaze. Stepping forward, adjusting his tie, Corwin Ashford asked, "Miss Fairchild, I hear you've proposed a public library. Is that true?" His question affirmed trust. In a town rife with hesitation, Sable Fairchild had earned a respected ally. The crowd erupted in murmurs, now tinged with admiration rather than doubt. In that moment, the atmosphere shifted. Wary glances turned to positive curiosity. A chestnut vendor grinned. "Didn't expect her to have clout with the courthouse." The whispers grew cheerful, marking Sable Fairchild's first turning point. From outsider to contributor. Under the oak, she exhaled softly, a smile blooming, knowing she'd cleared a major hurdle, societal prejudice. As afternoon melted into dusk, purple haze glimmering on tiled roofs, Sable Fairchild glanced at Thurston Huxley. Her eyes held no anger, only a measured forgiveness. She nodded to Judge Corwin Ashford, then returned to Orion Caldwell's side, where he waited. The clatter of hooves faded, carrying murmurs that Riverbrook will change. It was no longer mere gossip. It was a promise for tomorrow, when people would see Sable Fairchild not just with curiosity, but with the respect due a woman who dared defy prejudice. The golden afternoon light bathed the Riverbrook Town Hall auditorium, filtering through stained glass windows to cast long, radiant streaks across the worn wooden floor. Whispers from prominent families filled the room, sweat-dampened vests, pale silk dresses like wisps of mist. From the gallery's edge, merchants, small landowners, and representatives of traditional clans gathered, their faces stern, eyes probing one another. Outside the entrance, attendees jostled, the scene both formal and stifling, like a glass cage of mounting pressure. Amid it all, Thurston Huxley fidgeted, clutching his notes, his knuckles white. No one expected this emergency meeting to decide the town's future. When Corwin Ashford, the esteemed judge, struck his gavel, all movement hushed. His voice rang clear. "I declare this session open." A second strike cemented the ritual, transforming the auditorium into a legal arena. Instantly, Thurston Huxley shot to his feet, face flushed. "Your Honor, Ms. Fairchild cannot claim guest status. She's a stranger yet to be tested." His words flew like an arrow strung with tradition, striking the pride of those present. Eyes bored into him, some nodding in agreement, others frowning in dissent. In the midst of the chaos, the heavy doors creaked open, and Orion Caldwell entered with Sable Fairchild. His gaze exuded authority, his broad shoulders steady amid the storm. The room's chairs seemed to quiver as he passed. "With your permission," he said, his voice deep and firm, "I present Miss Fairchild, the lawful representative for the land issue." His brief words cut through hesitation like a sharp blade. Sable Fairchild stepped forward, impeccably dressed, her eyes blazing with confidence. Without a sigh, she drew a black leather case, placed it on the glass table, and carefully opened it. She laid out a series of originals, the deed of 1866 bearing Judson Fairweather's clear signature, followed by state-approved certifications and appendices documenting disputes buried across generations. Sable Fairchild's voice rose, calm but weighty. "You may verify the signatures, seals, and clauses detailing the land's wrongful seizure." She handed the documents to Corwin Ashford, her gaze unflinching. The crowd fell silent, lips sealed, awaiting the judgment to come. Corwin Ashford leaned forward, peering through his spectacles, muttering, "The signature, the seal, impossible to forge." He lifted his glasses, examining each detail, then looked at her with a mix of surprise and admiration. Soon after, Quentin Blackwell, a respected attorney from 3 states, stepped forward, bowing slightly. "I've consulted the State Archives Commission. These documents are authentic." His words landed like a hammer from the dais, shattering all doubt. Murmurs erupted, now laced with awe and respect. The auditorium exploded. Some whispered, others stood, their expressions shifting from defiance to alignment with justice. Thurston Huxley slumped into his seat, shoulders sagging, his chest heaving. Meanwhile, Sable Fairchild remained composed, regal in her chair before the assembly. She gathered her documents, scanned the room, and spoke. "I propose establishing the Fairweather Fund for Riverbrook's education and housing. Justice isn't vengeance, it's restoration." Her gaze silenced the room again, leaving only the heartbeat of those witnessing a turning tide. The tensest moment passed, giving way to a wave of hope. Corwin Ashford struck his gavel one last time. "This session is adjourned for the council to review the proposal. Thank you, Ms. Fairchild and Mr. Caldwell." The gavel's echo sounded like a drum, heralding a new era. Under the chandelier's glimmer, the faces of the powerful betrayed subtle smiles, nodding toward a fairer future. As Sable Fairchild and Orion Caldwell exited the auditorium, their presence seemed to illuminate the path of a Riverbrook awakened to historical truth. The early autumn dawn bathed the Riverbrook Town Hall in soft light, its rays filtering through tall windows to paint delicate streaks across the marble floor, heralding a hopeful new beginning. Rows of ancient wooden chairs stood neatly aligned, steeped in ceremonial dignity, but today they bore no trace of the past's weight. Cassidy Beaumont ascended the podium, her formal attire radiant, her eyes gleaming with joy as she announced the establishment of the Fairweather Fund, a non-profit dedicated to supporting education and housing for Riverbrook's residents. Her speech rang with emotion, a clarion call for a humane new era. "We not only restore the past for those gone, but build a future for generations to come." Applause surged, mingling with the heartbeat of the gathered crowd, affirming faith in a community united for justice and compassion. Soon after, the public elementary school was renamed Fairweather School, where Seraphia Quimby, the new principal, welcomed dozens of students to the first opening ceremony under its renewed banner. The courtyard buzzed with colorful flags and crisp white uniforms, children's laughter echoing across the red brick plaza. Seraphina Quimby beamed with satisfaction, watching eager eyes light up over new books in a small library corner, stocked with historical Riverbrook records donated by the Fairweather Fund. She cradled a volume, her voice warm. "Knowledge is the key to opportunity, and today every child here has the right to seize it." The students' cheers became a triumphant anthem, welcoming a future where dreams could take root. On the main boulevard leading to the Caldwell Library, a gleaming bronze plaque caught the sunlight, inscribed with "Fairweather Public Library, where knowledge converges." Passers-by paused to admire it, buzzing about the transformation of a space once reserved for the elite. At the ribbon cutting, Orion Caldwell and Sable Fairchild together pulled a crimson ribbon, revealing wide oak doors opening to a vast treasury of books. Inside, golden lamplight illuminated thousands of titles from classic novels to historical research, reflecting the community's boundless thirst for learning. Sable Fairchild stepped in, her gaze lingering on the shelves, whispering, "This isn't just a library. It's proof of justice and knowledge's power." Behind Caldwell Estate, the Fair Housing Project construction site hummed with activity, finalizing model homes. Dozens of workers and volunteers painted walls, laid stone pathways, and set sturdy brick foundations, adorning gardens with fragrant lavender. Amid it all, Marceline Greer appeared in work gloves, surveying the rising walls with a nod of approval. She smiled at Sable Fairchild, their eyes exchanging encouragement. "We've turned promises into reality." The whir of cement mixers, the clatter of hammers, and lively chatter formed a symphony of effort and belief in equitable homes for all. By afternoon, Corwin Ashford, the honorable judge, presided over a ceremony to transfer land rights to the Fairweather Fund. At a round ebony table he set down his gavel, striking it thrice to affirm the contract's legality. His voice resounded. "From today, the Fairweather family's former land becomes communal property, serving the public." Attendees nodded in agreement, faces of former skeptics now etched with respect. Sable Fairchild signed the document, her ink sealing an indelible mark on history. That evening, the Caldwell Mansion's foyer glowed with crystal chandeliers and soft music for a celebratory gala. Quentin Blackwell, the esteemed lawyer, raised a glass of red wine before the elegant guests. We've witnessed justice, not just in court but in human hearts, to our children's future, to fairness and unity. The clink of glasses mingled with resounding applause, capping a monumental day with the refreshment of hope and pride. The next day, Thurston Huxley returned to the town hall, no longer defiant but somber and earnest. He met Sable Fairchild, bowing sincerely. "I was wrong. Thank you for showing me true justice." Sable Fairchild offered a gentle smile, one of forgiveness and encouragement. Everyone deserves a chance to change. What matters is building something better together. The air settled, like the final scene of a play where each character finds a new role in a shared chronicle. In the central square, along a newly paved path, a simple bronze plaque was unveiled. Its slanted inscription read, "To Riverbrook, where justice was restored and hope endures." The afternoon sun glinted, casting golden light on the faces of townsfolk, their eyes misty before the timeless message. Sable Fairchild stood beside Orion Caldwell, watching children play on soft grass, their laughter ringing through a revitalized community. She rested a hand on his shoulder, whispering warmly, "We didn't seek vengeance. We built. That's true justice." He smiled, his eyes brimming with pride. As dusk fell, purple hues draped the tiled roofs, and Riverbrook donned a new mantle, fair, united, and rich in knowledge. Judson Fairweather's story was no longer just history, but a legacy igniting the future. In the chirping of crickets and gentle breezes, Riverbrook's people recounted. That day, a black woman named Sable Fairchild led us beyond prejudice, crafting a complete tale of justice. For generations to come, that story would echo, an eternal hymn to humanity's strength and pursuit of good. Listening to Sable Fairchild's journey left me profoundly moved by the steadfast power of her courageous heart. From the moment she stepped off the platform and endured the imprisoned stares of Thurston Huxley, to the moment she found unwavering support in Orion Caldwell, every step she took proved her self-respect and indomitable will. I was touched by how quietly she revealed Judson Fairweather's hidden documents, unearthing buried history and restoring justice for the entire community. Under Marceline Greer's guiding hand and Corwin Ashford's trusting gaze, she ceased to be a stranger and became a pivotal force reshaping Riverbrook's fate. I'll never forget Cassidy Beaumont's compassionate presence at the Fairweather Foundation's groundbreaking, nor Quentin Blackwell's authoritative legal validation of the truth. A character, from Serafina Quimby's comforting smile to Sable's silent determination, underscored a powerful message. Justice doesn't wait. The brave must seize it. Thank you to everyone who watched today's video on the Millionaire and Heart Stories channel. I hope Sable Fairchild's journey from rejection to reclaiming her dignity touched your hearts and renewed your belief in the power of knowledge and perseverance. If her resilience against prejudice inspired you, please hit like and subscribe so you won't miss our next uplifting stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below and tell your friends and family to help spread this message of fairness and compassion. Sincere thanks, and see you in our upcoming episodes.